Again, and welcome back. We're going to continue talking about the audio visualizer and visualizing audio data with JavaScript on Canvas, right? So I'm looking at the render method here, and we were just playing around with the circle renderer. I'm gonna comment that one out. Let's take a look at the vertical bars here. So this looks like like kind of your classic audio frequency analyzer, right? Here, the height of the bars is the loudness or the volume of the frequency, and the color and position of the bar is determined by the frequency itself. So the low frequencies are on the left and the high frequencies are on the right. So you can see this lower frequency there is louder than some of the higher ones, right? It's usually the case. So let's try another one. So here's another one. This is the same as that last one, but it's got fewer bars and they're mono in color, okay? So for this one, I had to boil down the frequencies to, or average the frequencies at a particular range of values. So maybe this is like the first 10, or this is like the next 10, or it's actually probably larger than 10, but you get the idea, right? So there's that one. Let's take a look at this one. So ask yourself, like, when we look at this, remember frequency array is an array of values, and there's 1,024 of them in the array, and every value goes from 0 to 255. So when we look at this one, ask yourself, like, what are the values, right? Okay, so what are the values here? Okay, so the position or the angle of the line is the index in the array, right? The length of the line is the value at that index, and then also the index is determining the color. Okay, so that's what's going on here, right? Let's go back to the bars renderer. I'm going to get the vertical bars right here, right? So that's this one, right? This one's kind of easier to understand. So the idea here is we need to draw a line from the bottom of the canvas up, right? And make the length of the line 0 to 300, right? Depending on the value in the frequency array, okay? So the way I've set this up is if we create a function, I call my functions renderers, right? And that function's going to take in some parameters to know how to draw, right? And your goal is to send in the frequency array and the canvas probably as your first two parameters, and then you can include any other parameters that you need, right? So let's take a look at this vertical bars renderer. And when you draw your renderer, what you'll do is you'll import it at the top like this with the import from syntax. So let me go find the vertical bar renderer. I think it's this one. Actually, vertical bars renderer. Maybe I misspelled that, I think, here. Yeah, because this one says vertical bar without an S. Actually, that's the thing. Since it's the default export, I can spell it differently here, right? Because it can be any name. So let's go to vertical bar renderer there and take a look at what we have, right? So I kind of put some notes in here, some docs. So we have param is frequency array, and it takes in a uint8 array. Param is the canvas context, CTX. Param is number, width, number, height, okay? So those are the parameters that the function takes. So we got to include those or it's going to fail, right? In all the renderers, I followed mostly the same steps that we're doing here, okay? So in some cases, maybe it's a little bit different, but most of them follow the same steps, and then they maybe do something different when we get down here to the drawing section, okay? So most of the canvases are going to, or most of the drawing renderers are going to do this. They're going to set the fill style on the canvas and then fill a rectangle that is the size of the canvas, okay? And then they're going to call fill, okay? And notice the fill color here, okay? I set it to an RGB value, an RGBA value with a transparency of 0.1, right? And if I change this to 1.0, then this is a totally opaque white square, right? We're going to just just going to draw white, and that's going to erase the entire canvas, right? So let me show you why I was using a number here like less than 1, right? So let's run our code again, and you can see, like, it looks kind of the same, but it's also a little bit different. It doesn't leave kind of like a trail, right? So if I change this to 0.1, then it will leave sort of a trail behind on the values. So you can see how they kind of fade out. So what happens in this case is every frame update on the computer, what it does is it overlays like a transparent layer of white, so we see a little bit of the previous lines below, and then it draws new lines on top of it, and then it overlays white on top of what's there. So this is kind of a nice effect, and you can adjust this number to taste. Okay, next, the canvas, we have to clear the whole thing, so this needs to be the height and width of the canvas. I probably could have just used the height and width here, and that might have been better, but I was just working, so that's what I got, right? There's always room for improvement. You can do that on yours, right? Okay, so next, and this is important here, is we need to get the length of the array. So I need to know how many numbers are available in my frequency array. Okay, so this should be 1024. Okay, and now that I know the number of steps that I have, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide that into the width of my canvas, right? So if I take the number of bars and I divide it into the width of the canvas, then I know how wide each bar is going to be. And in my case, the bars are going to be less than a pixel wide, right? Or they're going to overlap, okay? So I think what I did is I set the width here to 3 pixels for each bar, and then I made them overlap a little bit, right? But that means that, as I space the bars out, I know that the first bar is going to be all the way on the left at 0, and the last bar will be all the way at the right at 300, okay? If I didn't do this and I just set each bar to, say, a pixel number, then, like 1 pixel, then the first bar would be here, the bar at 300 would be here, and then the bar at 1024 would be way off the canvas, right? Okay, so I'm just working out the ranges that I need, right? Next, the color step. So you saw that the colors started with red, and then they went up to purple and violet, and then they would get to red again at this end, right? If I had any sounds in the frequency way on the right side, right? Okay, but the colors, the way I'm going to work with the colors is they go in a range of 0 to 360. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide my color wheel. So think about this as the color wheel. It's got 360 degrees, right? I'm going to divide it by the number of bars. Okay, so that means that each of the colors is in a step of one slice of 360 divided by 1024, right? So if I got to color 1024 all the way on the right side, that would be complete circle around the color wheel. Okay, great. So now, armed with these numbers, we can draw things on the canvas. Okay, I also set the canvas line width to 3, right? So I'm going to make each line 3 pixels wide. You can make that like 6 pixels wide if you wanted, right? And you'll see like the lines are a little blockier now, but they do overlap, okay? So this again, another one's kind of an adjustment to taste, right? Okay, now the drawing stage. To draw, I used a for each loop to loop over each frequency in my frequency array, okay? So it takes a callback here, and it's going to take in the frequency f and the index of the frequency I. And then I'm going to calculate a line that I'm going to draw. So I need to calculate the starting point and the ending point for the line, okay? So our first step is to normalize the data. So this is like, I should put a note in here, normalize value, okay? And the way we normalize the value is we're going to take the frequency and divide by the max frequency. And I know that the maximum frequency is 255, so I'll just divide by that number. And so if the frequency was 0, we get 0. If the frequency was 255 and we divide by 255, we get 1. And so if the frequency is anywhere in the range of 0 to 255, this part right here will give us a range of 0 to 1. Right? So if we multiply our 0 to 1 times the height, that converts the bar or creates the bar length right here, which would be a 0 to the height of the canvas, or in my case, 0 to 300. Okay? So we can scale our canvas by passing in a different height, and then the frequencies will always scale themselves to that height. Okay? So that's normalization. Okay? Next, we need to position the x value, so that's the starting horizontal position of the line, to our step times the index, right? So we've already taken the number of bars and divided by the width of the canvas to get our step value. And so then if we take the position in the array of the value, we can multiply by the index and the step to get the x position, right? So that's x number 1. And then I'm going to get y number 1. Y number 1 is just going to be the height that we figured out here, right? That the height of our canvas. And then, right, because that actually, the height actually puts us at the bottom of the canvas, because 0 would be at the top, right? X number 2 is going to be equal to x number 1. You could make these different if you wanted to draw diagonal lines or something, right? But I just left them the same. And then y number 2 is going to be where we draw from. So what I did is I set up x1 and y1 to be the starting point for the line, and x2 and y2 are going to be the ending point. So y number 2 is the height of the canvas minus the length of the bar. Okay? So we started at the bottom, and now to draw up, I need to come up with a smaller number. So I'm going to take the height of the canvas, 300, and subtract the bar length. So if the bar length was 150, then we would draw up to a 150, right? Okay, so now with these numbers, we can draw the line. Okay, so this is just going to draw one line, and our frequency array for loop, or for each loop, is going to draw each of those lines. So, you know, inside here, the callback is just drawing one line at a time. So the first thing is we're going to begin a path. Okay, so that's a new path. And then we're going to call ctx move to, and we're going to move to x1, y1. So that's our starting point, should be at the bottom edge of the canvas. And then we're going to line to, and this draws a line, and we're going to line to x2 and y2. So that should be a line that's somewhere above the bottom edge of the canvas. And then we're going to set the stroke style, and here I'm going to make an HSLA color. So that stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. So what you're going to pass in is those 4 values: hue, saturation, lightness, and alpha. So this is the hue right here, this is the saturation, this is the lightness, and this is the alpha. So our hue is going to be calculated as the color step. Remember, we calculated that as the 360 divided by the number of bars, right? And we'll multiply by I again to get the color at a particular step, right? Okay, so this should give us one color that's somewhere around that 360-degree circle, okay? So that's our color. So this number has to be 0 to 360. And then this is the saturation. It's like how bright the color is. And this is the lightness. So I'm just going to do colors 100% bright, right? You could do, 50% if you want to do kind of dull colors, right? Or you want to make them kind of gray, right? So I just did the full saturation. This lightness right here determines how bright or dark the colors are. So if you do something less than 50%, it's kind of like you're adding black to the color. So I'll do 30%, and now this is like I've added some black to the color. And if we do a number above 50%, like 80%, then this will be kind of a pastel color. It's like we're adding white to the colors, okay? But 50% is like no black or white. It's just like the color, okay? And then the last one is the transparency of the line. So I want to just draw them with full opacity, so I put 1.0 here, okay? So now that we've stroked our line, that actually doesn't, we still don't draw anything yet. It's kind of like we've created a path and we've planned a color to stroke it with, but now we have to call context.stroke to actually draw the line, okay? And then we hit the end of our callback, and we go back up to the top and we do it again for the next frequency value. So every frequency value, we're going to begin a path, we're going to calculate the position of the line, and then draw or stroke the line, and then stroke that path, okay? And then we'll draw another one, right? And this is important that we stroke the path here. Otherwise, if we don't, it will just draw with the last color. Since we want to draw each line in a different color, we need to set the color and then stroke the path before we draw the next line. Okay, so sorry, that was kind of a long explanation, but I walked through the whole thing. So hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on here. And then actually just one last note is I exported my renderer so we could import it into the other file. So your goal is to create your own renderer, and you can use this as a model. So create a file, put a function in there. Your function should take in the frequency array and the canvas context, and then maybe some other information, and then you should export your renderer. And in general, your renderer is going to use the frequency array and loop over the frequency array and then draw something, okay? So anyway, thanks for watching, and then maybe we'll go over some ideas in the next video.